So as people still continue to come in, first just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm Joe Cook, I'm the superintendent of schools, and
Tom Hardhauser, director of business.
so this is our third community presentation this evening on this referendum project. We're happy that you came out, we're happy to have this opportunity. Tonight we're going to take you through what the scope of the project is, the process that we use to get here, and then what will be the financial impact if the community decides to support this. We'll have an opportunity for some Q&A after we're done presenting. If the Q&A starts to go long, our middle school administrators will be here, and they will offer a tour for the individuals who'd like to go and take a look at the school and see the spaces that we're highlighting this evening. So, I want to highlight some of the good things that are going on in our schools right now. Academically, our district is doing very, very well. We are in the top 10% out of the 367 K-12 schools in the state. We are 24th in the area of student achievement, 9th for on-track post-secondary readiness, and we're in the top 25 for both math and English language arts. So this is an excellent position for us academically. We want to really highlight this second bullet point here. 65.4% of our grade 3 students are meeting proficiency on the forward exam. This is the highest in the K-12 school districts in Waukesha County. I do want to point out though that it's very important to understand that proficiency does not mean able to read or not able to read. It's how the students performed on an exam on a given day. Okay, that exam has changed over time, that benchmark has changed over time. But that 65.4% is the highest in Waukesha County. Waukesha County is a very high academic school, county for its public schools, so we feel we're in a very good spot there. We have 2 national blue ribbon schools and 1 national green ribbon school. We are a member of the Classic 8 conference. We offer over 100 activity and athletic offerings for our students. We've got excellent safety plans in our district. Our mill rate has been below the state average for 35 consecutive years. Tom will talk a little bit more about that later. Our bond rating is AA from Standards & Poor's. So if you're not familiar with the bond rating, that is our credit score as a school district. We're very, very high. I think AAA is as high as you can go. There's maybe 5 school districts in the state
We're knocking on the door
that are at AAA rating. Then we've repeatedly passed taxpayer-friendly balanced budgets. So Tom's going to take us through a little bit of the work that was done at MHS a few years ago.
All right, so as we talk about long-range facility planning and the 8 buildings that are in our school district, the eight schools that we have are assets of the community. They don't belong to the school board or to me and to Dr. Cook. They belong to the residents of the school district. So these buildings are yours. And what we do or don't do with them is ultimately the decision that belongs to the community. Back in 2016, the last time the community had a decision was a referendum that revolved around Mukwonago High School. And by and large, we felt that that project was successful. We have 6 pictures here that kind of highlight what the outcome of a successful referendum was. You can see the Performing Arts Center in the upper right-hand corner, our library space, our career and technical education courses. We take great pride in all the spaces that we have because we feel that whether you're college bound to a 4-year university, go into the armed forces, if you're going to go to a trade program after high school, whatever it is you're looking for, Mukwonago High School has something for you and will prepare you for life after high school. You can see our athletic spaces, our cafeteria, our academic spaces. The entire building was ultimately touched, renovated, expanded, and we feel that this is what a successful referendum can do. This really didn't just transform what happens in our academic spaces for students, but also for community use. So in terms of the timeline and how we got to where we are right now, facility planning has really been an ongoing conversation with the community and the school board. So this timeline here goes back to 2015 and when we kind of started and got into that high school project here. And then that conversation continued. Once the high school was renovated, the conversation of are there any other needs? And at the school board level, at the administrative level, we put all ideas on the table. We discussed what ideas we needed at the elementary, at the middle. There were still needs even at the high school. Should we expand our career and tech ed spaces even more and double down, so to speak? And we put all ideas on the table, and then we started to pull ideas off, prioritize those ideas. And last spring, we had 4 meetings with the community We focus one meeting on the elementary level, one meeting on the middle school level, one on the high school level, and then one wrap-up meeting. And in those 4 meetings, we ultimately talked about the ideas that we had. We asked the community for their feedback. Do these ideas, are they of value to you? Do you agree with these? What's the priority you have on these ideas? And ultimately, we got feedback from a community group here that we took that to a survey. The feedback that we got from the community became a survey that we launched this past September and October. And 3,100 people took that survey, and we're going to present that feedback from the survey here. So there's a lot of questions to ask, but we're just going to highlight 4 aspects of that, 4 questions. 89% of the 3,100 people who took that survey said that the district is great or good at delivering high-quality education. And we take pride in that number, but we also recognize there's 11% more to win over, and we'll aim high and continue to get even more people feeling that way about our district. When we presented the ideas revolving around the middle school, which you'll hear, that's going to be the bulk of our presentation here tonight. When we presented those ideas, 65% of respondents said, we agree with these ideas. We encourage you to pursue a referendum. Once we attached the price tag to that project, then 63% still said they would definitely or probably support the referendum, again, with that price tag attached to it. So we'll talk about what that middle school project is. And then finally, we asked a secondary question. Some of the feedback that we heard from the community was to expand our career and tech ed spaces, which would displace one of our gyms at Mukwonago High School. And then as our current tech ed spaces took a gym space over, we would backfill that with a large multi-purpose indoor facility. When we surveyed the community for that, 47.5% said they were in support of that, which isn't enough support. So we listened to the community, we tabled that idea, and it's not moving forward at this time. But we do move forward with the middle school and our 4K spaces. So on April 2nd, this is the question that's going to appear on the ballot. As you go to vote, be sure to flip over and go to the back side because there's questions on both sides of your ballot, okay? Well, we're going to talk about what this project is, and if you are in support of what you hear tonight, you would vote yes, and if you were not in support of what you hear tonight, you would vote no. But we're going to take the time to explain what's all embedded in this question. So I'll go through the need. The need's really going to, about 90% of the need's going to focus on the middle school here. So we talk about Parkview Middle School, where we are tonight. This building was originally constructed, and the start of this building was in 1954, so we're at the 70-year-old mark, okay? In 1954, this was a state-of-the-art building. But time has passed, this building has grown old, it has lots of needs, and you'll hear about those needs here. This building houses 750 to 800 students in a given year for grades 7 and 8 only. It originally started as Mukwonago Senior High School, but has ultimately become our middle school here. The hallways are continuously tight through each day, and the classroom spaces are the same. You can see just a couple other examples. When you look at class sizes here, we ultimately don't even have space to put more kids in these spaces if we wanted to. When we take a look at some of our music areas here, which you'll see on the next couple slides, we don't even have enough space to meet the demand. So there's a lot of demand of students want to get in there, and we don't even have the spaces that can really even accommodate. And you can see how tight we pack these spaces. These are essentially converted classrooms. These are not music spaces. If you're building a music space right now, you're going to build something with a taller ceiling to accommodate the sound of the instruments right now. These are just simple classrooms that have to make do. When you take a look at our gym space here, our gym spaces are some of the most highly utilized spaces throughout the entire school district. So here at the middle school, also at the high school, our students will use them from 7 or 8 a.m. until 3 or 4 p.m. And then when the school day ends, you're going to have community groups that are using our spaces. I can see we have some lacrosse players out there. Before, when there was snow outside, they were inside, and our spaces are always used. Again, assets of the community. More gym spaces needed for our Phi-Ed courses and for community programming. We have a fitness area here. Again, that's in a common classroom that really, it's way too tight to really serve the purpose that it intends to serve. Again, you can see the original gym there along Highway 83. Again, once upon a time, that was a state-of-the-art facility. It's 70 years old now, and it's in need of some help. Some of our specialty programs, so we're taking a look right here at a family and consumer science course. Again, if you just have dated spaces, with what we have in those classrooms, they don't really serve the curriculum that we intend to teach here in these spaces. Our cafeteria, where we are right now, really is a lot of the planning, the way we design an academic day is really, we can only do what the cafeteria allows us to do. So there's only so many students we can get in here on a given time with this 800 students that we have, that we have long congested lines, we're filled up, that the academic schedule can only, again, is ultimately dictated based on what limitations are from this room. Our library is, if you're taking a look at a library, or you're going to build a library today, it's not going to look like this. It's not going to be as tight as this is. You're going to have a lot more flexible space to do a multitude of projects. Project Lead the Way courses are commonly found in libraries, but we don't have the space to accommodate those things here in our current configuration. We have a great robotics program here in the Mukwonago Area School District. At the high school level, we have Team 930, which is internationally competitive. It's not just state competitive or nationally competitive, internationally competitive. And those students start here with that coursework here when they're as middle school students. But we don't, again, we're using common classroom spaces that are tight with low ceilings that don't meet the needs of what those kids are ultimately trying to do. So getting out into the hallways is almost a must for the things that they have to do. So we got to get creative at times for these kids to find what they need. In terms of safety and traffic flow here, if anybody's ever driven by this building at 7 a.m. or 3 p.m. on a normal pickup or drop-off time, this picture, in my opinion, doesn't tell the story of what it's really like. Traffic is constantly backed up as far as Highway 83 routinely, okay? So given where the building is situated relative to the intersection, it creates a safety hazard. We had to institute our right turn only just because of the risks of coming out of the parking lot was a risk and clearly not preferred. So when you take a look around Waukesha County, okay, you're going to find that what is the most common middle school configuration? You're going to find we are one of 2 districts that still have a 7th and 8th grade configuration, and that you're commonly going to find grades 6, 7, and 8 in one building, or 5, 6, 7, and 8 in one building. And we'll talk more about why those configurations are preferred. But we are really we are in a fading configuration. Nobody's migrating this way or gravitating this way. It's going towards the 6, 7, 8 model or 5, 6, 7, 8 model. So we talked about both settings, and ultimately the 6, 7, and 8 is ultimately where we're leaning right now. So when we talked about that 6, 7, and 8th grade coming together in one building, we said, well, okay, well, which ways can we do this? And we talked about keeping this building and renovating and expanding to add 6th grade. And we talked about that last spring in April and May at our community focus groups. And when we presented those plans and the cost with that, the community focus groups ultimately said, based on building new or renovating this building, we recommend that you build new. The reason for that is that the costs were really close. So in listening to the community, if you're going to make the investment, make the proper investment, do it completely correct, and that the recommendation was to build new. So the estimated cost to renovate is $85 million, which is 88% of the cost of just building new. And when you're renovating here, there's limitations that the building has. The current layout is something you have to keep. The load-bearing walls and the way that this building is designed is, there's just limitations on what you can ultimately do. The renovation would ultimately take longer as well than just building new because of the fact that you can only work on the building when there's kids not here. So you're talking nights, weekends, and summer months. The renovation would take longer than just building new. And ultimately, we would not alleviate traffic flow whatsoever here. By keeping the building where it currently is, as close as we are to the intersection, that wouldn't really change. So all those considerations ultimately said, hey, let's build new. When we take a look at Parkview Middle School right now, as I said, 70 years old, there's a lot of major mechanical components inside of this building that are reaching end of life or have reached end of life. So when we're talking about our HVAC systems, our chillers, our boilers, a lot of the major mechanical components are really end of life now. And we can keep those things limping along, but at some point, a complete renovation, a complete tear out and install is required. So over the next 5 or so years, there's about $7.3 million of work. Before we sink that money in, now just seems to be the proper time of what direction would you like us to go. The community will ultimately decide. As I go through the next couple of slides here, just highlighting the exterior of the building. We have old skylights, old windows that are starting to fail. Some of the masonry work around the outside, the exterior requires some repair and some tuck pointing. We have elements of our sections of our floor and ceiling that are starting to fail. Here you can see a couple pictures of some of our major mechanical units that I just talked about that are end of life. Okay, so that was the need as we heard it from our community regarding regarding our middle school. In addition to the middle school, then another need that emerged in our conversations with the community was 4K. And 2015 is when we started our 4-year-old kindergarten program. And we were one of the last school districts in the state of Wisconsin to bring 4-year-old kindergarten into the district. When we did that, we didn't have enough space in our elementary schools. So our current elementary schools right now are 5-year-old kindergarten through the 6th grade. We didn't have space to bring in 4-year-old kindergarten. So we took a community partners approach. So currently we work with the YMCA, Kids Connection, and Vernon Child Development Center. We had 6 partners when we started and we're down to 3. Finding teachers with our existing partners at times has been a challenge. So the current way we deliver 4K has grown more and more stressful in the sense that when we lose partners, we have to take responsibility for that. But that means we need the space for that. So as we look forward into the future with 4K, we really have to shoulder the responsibility of making space in our buildings to do that. But we don't have that space given how we are currently configured. So the need is to create some space in our elementary schools for 4-year-old kindergarten. And then the second bullet point here highlights some of the traffic concerns at Big Bend Elementary. So much like the traffic concerns here, everybody that drives along Highway 164 at pickup or drop-off time at Big Bend Elementary, you're going to see the same thing where traffic's backed up onto a major road, and it's a safety hazard. We want to address that. So this project would also address that safety hazard as well.
So through all of that work over the last number of years, we've arrived at what is being proposed here right now, which is the solution to what those needs are. And from the middle school perspective, it is building a new 6th through 8th grade middle school that would house about 1,200 students. We would look at increasing and improving the classroom spaces for music, for our STEM courses. We would be creating a gymnasium and a fitness center that was a 3-court basketball court. So just for perspective, the West Gym at the high school is a 3-court basketball court, and it accommodates a lot more activity than what our current configuration does. We'd be looking at the proper separation, I'll show you this on a drawing here in a minute, between pedestrians, vehicles, and then our bus traffic. I'll show you how that breaks down on the property. We have the potential to have a shared drop-off location with Clarendon Elementary by pulling the buses off of the road if that was ever a need in the neighborhood. Again, energy efficient systems and lighting, and then we maintain the practice fields and the track. So for perspective, this isn't obviously a final drawing, but this is what it could look like on our property. You can see on the right-hand side of the slide there, you can see where Clarendon is, you can see where our district office is, and the yellow block in the middle is our proposed new site for the middle school. On the top part of the drawing, just off of Veterans Way, you'd be able to see where the visitors and staff parking would be, and then where the parent drop-off would be. And then on the bottom side of the slide, you can see where the bus drop-off and staff and event parking would be. That drop-off location would both drop-off locations would pull away from the intersection, which we know is very busy at the beginning of the day and the end of the school day. But it would also create then that potential, that short sidewalk between that parking lot and Clarendon, should that ever be needed as a space. We'd be able to maintain the athletic facility, so the track, the football field, baseball fields. We would just be pulling that on top of that dashed line there, which is the current building. So we'd be taking the building down, we'd be creating those athletic and activity spaces there. We also do then have the potential for parking on this property to help accommodate the park across the road. We know that there's a lot of events there in the summertime, in the spring and the fall. So, and we know that Parkview is currently used for that. So we'd have the ability to do a lot on this property, a lot on that flat space. The benefits for sixth graders, so we do have curricular benefits for our sixth grade students. We'd be able to enhance the opportunities in the area of world language, mathematics, career and technical education, and music. When you look at how curriculum is designed, usually it is designed grades 6 through 12, and then kindergarten through 5th grade. So the split would be more natural. Our sixth graders, and we do have some elementary folks here right now, currently going to school at the elementary level. They are articulating, we hear from some families, we hear from some staff, that the sixth graders are ready to be middle school students. They are ready to make that transition themselves. I'm hearing it in my own household. I'm hearing it from others that 5th grade is a nice time for them to make that transition on. And then we do have the option and the opportunity for additional co-curricular and extracurricular opportunities for our sixth graders by connecting them to the middle school and connecting them to the middle school program. The 4-year-old kindergarten, and I'll get into some drawings in a little bit here, but we'd be able to create the 4K spaces. If the sixth grade moves from the elementary to the middle school, there's currently 3 sixth grade classrooms at our elementary school. Those would be converted into 2 4-year-old kindergarten classrooms. 4K generally requires about 1,200 square feet per classroom for the kids, and it also requires in-class bathrooms. If you remember when your children were 3, 4, 5 years old, that's always a very handy feature to have the bathroom nearby. It definitely plays out that way for us in school. So we'd be creating 2 classrooms out of the 3 vacated classrooms with the bathrooms in the room for the kids. And what we'll show you, and again the drop-off, so if you see on the top of this page there, anybody familiar with Big Bend in the morning and the afternoon? Okay, it gets very congested there. What we'd be looking at doing is pulling and reconfiguring the parent drop-off up to the top side of the property, again trying to alleviate a little pressure at that intersection. When we get into our buildings, anything in gray on these drawings is space that won't be touched. Anything that is in blue over the next few schools is going to be touched. You can see where we're building the 4K classrooms, renovating for 4K, and then you'll see in some of those drawings, you'll see flex space, which would be like a small group intervention space. You might see special education space on there, where we do small group interventions for our students receiving special education. You might also see storage. Our elementary locker rooms in some schools would be touched. We do not use the locker room for changing, showering. Right now they're used for storage. So we would maintain storage space, but we'd also create some instructional spaces. So this is what Big Bend would look like, or could look like. This is Clarendon. Rolling Hills. On Rolling Hills, you'll see a 5K space. We would just be updating the 5K space to keep the early learning together. Prairie View. Section. And now we'll talk a little bit about the investment.
All right, so if we look ahead to the cost and the increase, what is this ultimately going to do to our taxes? I'll answer that here. Before I get into that, I want to just talk about the history of our district's finances very quickly. Starting in the 93-94 school year, that was a major pivotal year for the funding of public schools in Wisconsin. Prior to this time, school boards could levy and create any amount of revenue for students that they chose and saw fit. But starting this year, school districts had a limit on how much money per student they received. And school boards had some leeway building up to this, but starting here, school districts are locked in. So school boards can influence these numbers up or down, so that, again, there was some leeway there. Our school board ultimately got married to a number that was very fiscally conservative at $5,320. That was the least allowable amount according to state law at that time. And you can see we got less money on a per student basis than every other school district in Waukesha County. So that's 93-94. When we fast forward about 30 years later to the most recently completed school year, the last school year, we improved from last place to second last place by $16 per student. So in this particular year, we are at $10,016 per student, which is $16 north of the state mandated minimum. So ultimately, what did that mean? In terms of building our operational budget, how we pay for lights, for teachers, for paper and copy machines and all that, we take the amount that we receive per student, we multiply that by the number of resident students that we have, and that creates the amount of revenue we have to work with. When we compare ourselves to New Berlin, which is the fine school district, I just want to highlight the differences here. They receive about $1,650 more, had over 300 less students than us, but still received $3.7 million more than us. That was our snapshot last year. This was our story every year for 30 years. So some folks might say, well, can't you just save for a building, and sock some money away each and every year until you have enough to pay for it? The answer is we never could get there. We can never set enough money aside throughout our budgets to build a new building. We can do things in terms of preserving our buildings and keeping our roofs in good working order with our 8 existing buildings, but when it comes time to build one, there's just no way that with the way inflation moves that finish line and the cost changes year to year and increases year to year, that we can ever reach that value. We have one of the smallest operating budgets and the least amount of funding throughout the entire state on a per student basis that we couldn't get there. One way that we can compare our rate of taxation and the intensity of taxation for our K-12 schools is through the mill rate. The mill rate represents how much taxation per $1,000 of your house's fair market property value. So here you can see at $6.20, we are in the bottom 25% of K-12 school districts in southeastern Wisconsin. Over the last 35 years, our mill rate has been below the state average. And as you'll hear, that $6.20, our current mill rate for the 23-24 school year is the lowest mill rate in our district's history. Despite our low funding, we have always produced balanced budgets. We have proactively set money aside at the beginning and at the end of each school year to address whatever needs, building needs we might have. And with any liabilities that we create along the way, if we do what we can to attract the best and brightest teachers to come work in our school district, and one of the things that we do is we have a post-employment benefit. And with that creates a liability. When you promise something and someday that's going to become due. And we fund that along the way, that our liabilities are 100% funded. We are not going to burden future school districts and future administrators with the decisions we make today. So if we make a promise, we fund it, we set money aside, so when the bills come due, we're prepared to do exactly that. With our current debt that we have associated with the 2016 project at Mukwonago High School, we've refinanced that debt, we've prepaid that debt, and if we were to pause this conversation and this project just for the time being, we are on track to pay this 20 years worth of debt off in half the time. Okay, so we have done what we can to pay this debt off early. In terms of the impact is a 69-cent increase on the mill rate, or $69 per $100,000 of a house's fair market value. So if you just use multiples of 100,000 to figure out where your house might fit into that conversation, you would just multiply that same value by 69 to figure out what would be your impact in your current situation. Okay, so as I said here earlier, just a moment ago, $6.20 is the lowest mill rate in our district's history. All right, and then if this were to pass, it would push to $6.89, so a 69-cent increase on the mill rate. All right, with our current mill rate and our current debt, all right, if we took on no new debt, there was no referendum, or it didn't pass, we are currently here at $1.21. This is the mill rate just for our debt, okay? That's to pay off the project at the high school. We would have 1, 2, 3 more levies, and then that would go away. Taxes would drop significantly at that time. If this referendum were to pass, we'd go from $1.21 up 69 cents, and then it would just step down here for approximately 20 years to pay that off. So that would be the impact of the referendum in terms of finances. Okay? So in terms of the total cost, $102.3 million, $97.3 million is dedicated towards the building of the new middle school, the site work to prepare that, and then ultimately, once that building would be prepared and ready, then we would demolish this building here, okay? If passed, the building, the new middle school would open in the fall of 2027. All right, the remaining $5 million would go towards the Big Bend Elementary parking improvement along with the 4K renovations. And just to go back to those 4K renovations at our elementary schools, we're not talking about expanding our elementary buildings, just simply renovating the space that we already have to fit the needs of bringing 4-year-old kindergarten students into our buildings to meet the community demand there. All right, well, we're here. There's no other meetings coming up, so this is the last one. Good time, here you are. So with that, our presentation concludes, and we're going to open it up for questions that you might have.
So you said that there was an $85 million estimate for renovation of the existing school. Couple things. I'd like to know, were there 3 estimates on that renovation? Who did that estimate? And you know, how is that cross-checked and verified?
Sure. Well, we had 2 estimates. We had 2 values that were ultimately given to us. One from C.G. Schmidt and one from J.P. Cullen. So we had 2 reputable people that do this professionally day in and day out that gave us values that we feel confident that those were correct values. We have Kurt Wiebelhaus here. I'm going to point to Kurt here. Kurt's our former director of buildings and grounds here, and Kurt serves as an owner's representative and guides school districts when they're doing projects of this magnitude to verify that what we're getting from as information, that those values are reasonable. So we feel confident that we have good values there.
I can expand on it a little bit further. So it was renovations and additions for that dollar amount. The process that when you have projects of this size, having that construction manager concepts, we have 2 separate ones provide us, we call them budgets, right? That allows us to plan, allows us to ask the questions. This project is not fully designed, right? We're not going to invest the dollars to do a complete set of bid documents and fully design it until it's supported. But with the architect, Bray Architects we've been working with, have put the concepts together, allowing the construction manager to put budgets behind it. If it goes forward, then it gets put out into a bid format where we're competitively bidding with all the different trades that are out there. So that would happen a year, call it 8 months to a year after a successful referendum. Then it would, after it's all designed, get out and put out to a bid, public bidding, and then we get our numbers back and then move forward from there.
Okay. So I did see a slide that spoke to the fact that there needs to be new windows, new some tuck pointing, new HVAC, boiler system, all that. And I thought I saw on the bottom of that slide a total of $7.5 million. So I'm just trying to cover the difference there, the 85 and the $7.5 million. I understand there's some expansion, like you mentioned, involved with that, but is there a further breakdown of that differential between 85 and 7.5?
So that would be just keeping, I'm going to back up here to go back to that slide, because that would be just keeping the building as is. It's no renovations, no improvements, other than just keeping this building in its current shape. We're almost there. Here we go. This is really just to keep this building where it is. We're not moving it back. We're not expanding it for 6th grade. We're not changing any walls, any hallways. We're keeping the the classrooms the same size that they are today.
Yep.
And this is just to keep this building in its current state, really, without leaking water, with the heaters turning on when November comes.
Right.
All those things, just to keep the basics going.
So just on that slide, just one thing that caught my eye. I took a walk around the school prior to this meeting. I'm seeing $1 million for updating the flooring. I saw your one slide had a couple of cracked tiles in it, but I'm looking at this flooring. I just don't see why the flooring in the hallways, around it. I don't see buckling. I don't see, it's not in terrible shape. That's $1 million to spend on, for this estimate on flooring. I wonder how many of these other items in here are like that, where, I don't see an apparent need to replace all this flooring for $1 million.
I can comment on that. So that budget, Parkview and all the schools, Andy, our current facility director here, he'll put those budgets together and the flooring, so take note of this as you're doing a tour or walking out. When you're walking down that main corridor, just listen to your footsteps as you'll hear some hollow spots, right? So it's a constant, when I was the facility director here, and when Andy, it's a constant thing that these tiles are popping, right? So maintenance crews do a good job of repairing it. That's what we want is as people are walking through the buildings and that first impression of the school, we want it to look good. But the challenges of these tiles popping, and you'll notice that as you're walking down, just kind of listen to your footsteps of how it changes the sound as you're walking across those hollow tiles, and yeah, it's growing there. So it's those things. I mean, we can, if the answer is no to this, we'll just continue to do that. We'll continue to do what we can do with the dollars that are available to maintain and keep it looking nice, kind of put lipstick over areas that are in rough shape. And so a lot of those, there's a history or pattern of do you keep on patching or repairing, or do you save that dollars right now and this, at some point in time when you need the investment, you know, as you went through this process, we feel now is the right time, but if the answer is no, then you know, in the coming years, those dollars will be spent just to keep it maintained.
Part of that maintaining of the floors too is both gym floors are outdated, they need to be replaced. To replace both of those gym floors, you're looking at close to $1 million to replace both of them. And just replaced Rolling Hills 3 years ago, it was over $100,000. Part of that too is some of these floors have mercury in them, so we have to abate them. So there's different parts that add into this. If you look at the tile that's in this room, and this isn't as bad as maybe some of the classrooms, but the tile's starting to separate. You can see the gaps between there. It's getting harder to wax, and they're starting to pop up, as Kurt said earlier. So it's not that it's all bad, but it's getting to the point that we do need to replace instead of just repair.
Sir? Yep.
To touch on your points, the LED lighting that you want to do, that should have been done years ago. You've been paid back that money and then some by now. And why wasn't that done 5 years ago?
There's
It's
a lot
probably a
of,
year and a half payback on a project like this at best.
there's a lot of competing priorities. We have a new roof, section of roof at Mukwonago High School that's going in this summer. That's almost $2 million. The following summer, the roof at Clarendon in its entirety will be replaced. And there's only so much that we can do at a time to.
Those don't generate money, they don't save you in anywhere. There's
But they, with water
utility
coming,
bill now.
with water coming in, it can create a disaster. You have to keep the water out. I understand though, and I do agree, if we had a budget big enough to do that, we certainly would. We certainly would.
Could you go back to your timeline when you guys started thinking about this stuff?
Sure. So I think the first time that, here we go, in December of 2017, we had a school board meeting here in the library, and this was the initial conversation 7 years ago.
Question, you just mentioned you got a new roof on one of the schools. What's next? Which elementary school is next to get major updates, or what's the next project that you guys talked about? Any of that
Sure,
yet? Or-
yeah. So we looked at that, we did a long-range population study to say, well, where's our community heading? You know, not just the village of Mukwonago, but all 11 municipalities in our school district boundaries. And we took a look at that, and in 2035, our best guess at this time is that we're gonna grow by 350 resident students by that time. Now, there's a lot of assumptions and ifs in there. You know, there's certain spaces that, you know, if you talk to the village planners or the plan commission here in Mukwonago, the way that the comprehensive future land use map is laid out and planned for, if those neighborhoods start to materialize and grow, then we have reason to believe that we're going to grow. What's next at the elementary school is completely dependent on population movements. If the population grows and if the students come, then at that point, we would consider something at the elementary school. But we're not there at this time. By moving 6th grade out and bringing 4K in, we feel that we're still in a spot where this would be a multi-decade solution, not just a short fix of any sort. But anything major at the elementary schools would be dependent if and only if the enrollment increases in such a way that it would demand it. That's something way down the road. That's not something that's on the immediate radar or thought about really at this time. That's just wait and see. But first things first, this is where the need is.
And there's two enrollments that we do pay attention to. Resident enrollment, which is Tom talks about, he showed it to you in the budget slides. That does generate a substantial portion of our revenue. We also look at open enrollment. And in an open enrollment pattern, we have about 300 students who are resident students who open enroll out. But we gain about 650 students who open enrollment in. And so before we got to a place where we said we need to do expansion at the elementary level, we would look at how many students are we letting in under open enrollment, and then we would slow that down to accommodate for resident kids. We only use open enrollment to fill classes that are already running. So we're not using open enrollment to add teachers, add sections, and add programs. But if we have a third grade classroom that has 21 students, and we can go up to 24 students, we would add those 3 students for the revenue, which is about $8,500 per student. We would bring them in because the desk is paid for, the materials are paid for, the staff member is already on. So we would pull the revenue in that way. If we started to see increased resident enrollment, we would lower the number of students that we accepted under open enrollment to account for that first. And then if we hit a bubble that we couldn't accommodate, we would come back and have that same type of conversation about what do we need to do with our elementary space.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah, I'm also curious, so what's the middle school hold right now, about 800 you said?
Current enrollment is 750 to 800. That's the enrollment of number of students that are here. In terms of capacity, we're reaching capacity in all, we're close to our capacity in our elementaries and our middle school. We don't have a ton of space.
So with the new one, the 1,200, how much room does that give us to keep growing?
So yeah, good question. So we have our current 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes are in the range of 350 to 375. And that's, we would have room to accommodate up to 1,200 students that we would be able to meet that. We would be in a good spot there.
If you go back to the slide with the footprints, it looks like the footprint for the new school is not any bigger than the footprint for the current school.
It's be 3 stories, so it's not larger in terms of layout, but it's tall. It's cheaper and more cost effective to build up than it is to build out.
Okay, well,
Now, I
was
should
just
say
comparing-
this is not finalized, you don't, again, Kurt said it here earlier, we're not gonna pay the investment to have the final drawings done. If we might not have the money to do it, that wouldn't be the smartest spend of money. So there's still more thought that needs to go into that, and that's something that would occur if the referendum passes. So, we're not saying it's gonna look exactly as you see it there, but in terms of another similar school built in Oshkosh, that's for the same grade, for the same number of students, that's approximately the size, that's 3 stories, so we just kind of use that as a starting point.
And just for perspective, the current building that we're in right now is about 115,000, looking at you, Andy, square feet. We're proposing this drawing, this budget is based off of a 235,000 square foot facility. So twice the size of what we are in right now is what we're looking at. And that accommodates for the cafeteria space, performance stage, gymnasium space, the classroom spaces, and so on.
Now, did I also understand that there's only like 3 or 4 years left on paying off the high school?
Correct.
Can't we nurse this thing along until that's paid off and then jump into a new project?
Yeah.
Well, that's the choice. That's the choice here. So we could pay it off and then and have this conversation in 2 or 3 years. That's certainly one way to think.
Yeah, well, the
of it.
referendum is either or. I mean, it's yes or no, that's the only choice you
It's
have.
not on the referendum. If people had the choice, they knew, look, high school referendum is dropping in 3 years, can we do the project then? I'll bet
So
you
I
can.
guess-
Hell, yeah.
The one thing I guess I just asked you to consider is that there's a cost to doing nothing, that this project, the middle school alone at $97 million, won't be $97 million 3 years from now. It'll grow, inflation will push it. And then some folks say, well, why didn't you ask us? You know, you can take it the direction and argument either way. And I respect it, like, I get it. It's a solid thought. So
And
no
again, that's
question.
the thing that we did have to factor in there is that maintenance sheet that Tom had. Because if those systems start to fail, and then we invest in, and then we come back in 2 years or 3 years and say, hey, this is the project, the thing that we have to be cautious of is you just put $1 million in the boilers. Why are you now wanting to build a new school? You're putting $1 million into roofs. Why do you want to do it in the school right now? When it doesn't fully meet what our need is.
And another question you kind of highlight all the time, or a point that bullet point that you highlighted was that you've asked the community and you got the community input and blah, blah, blah. I notice these referendums always come up in the April election. That's traditionally the lowest turnout election. Why don't we do this in fall when when there's a bigger majority of the people would have a say in this?
Well, I say that given our current, there's gonna be high turnout in April. We anticipate.
Well, it's traditionally the lowest turnout election.
Well, I think, like, there's still.
And the high
some-
school referendum was also in April.
Yeah.
So it just sounds like you're not really asking the community, you're just trying to, it sounds like you're trying to make this, the best opportunity for passing, is what I'm looking at it as. Because
So-
you have the smallest amount of people that.
I guess going to it from a process standpoint, we did survey the community. We had 400 and some odd more responses in this survey than we did in the last survey. And those 400 responses, the 3,100 responses that we had from the community suggested that we take this approach. Now, did it say go for it in April or go for it in November? The April election is going to have a high turnout. Will it have as high of a turnout as November? Probably not, but it will have a high turnout. And we see that across the state, is that the April turnout is high. We do know school districts went in February, a couple months ago, or 2 months ago now, 1 month ago, for referendum questions as well.
Yeah, a couple of them didn't
And
pass.
some didn't pass. So we're looking at the April. We also have the opportunity as a school district to only ask two referendum questions a year. So the state limits us to 2 questions a year.
The calendar.
In a calendar year. And so if this question is asked in April, if there's something that we missed in our work, in our presentation, and we go back and ask the community what it is, it does give us the opportunity to say in November, this is what we're looking at. If we go in November, then we're going into the next calendar year, and we felt that this gives us the best cycle to meet what the community's needs are.
You would get such a better actual thought on what the community wants if we did it in November, where 80% of the population is gonna come out to vote, especially this November. I looked it up in 2020. Now, I'm not trying to be ungrateful. I like this district. My kids went through here. They did a lot of volunteering. You don't know me. I've always been here. But in 2020, 35% voted in the primary and 73% voted in the fall, more than double. And out of those 3,100 surveys you got back, how many did you send out?
We
One every
sent a paper
How many
copy.
did you send out?
We sent a paper copy to every address in our district.
Which is how
And we
many?
have 31,000 residents in our district,
Okay.
and I don't know how many
you know that,
addresses
Chris?
that equates to. But every household got it.
I just feel like, especially this April 2nd, the presidential primaries are already decided. People are gonna be like, I know, I vote this way or this way. There's no choices really in the presidential primary. And besides the fact that the referendum is gonna be on the ballot, I wouldn't go if the referendum wasn't on the ballot. I just wouldn't. I mean, because it's already been decided, me personally. But in the fall, almost, especially this election, I bet you it's gonna be 80%. It just bothers me that this is gonna get decided by 20% of the population versus 80% of the population. If it gets voted in, that's fine. It's not gonna affect me either way, but if 20% of the people are deciding for, it's not your fault that people won't come out, I understand that, but, it just doesn't seem quite right.
In order to do the referendum, our school board had to take action basically in December. And at that time,
Okay.
we didn't know what the primary in April was gonna look like. Was it gonna be
Okay.
competitive or settled at this point? We had no clue.
But it's always significantly less than fall, always.
But we know that it's
Statistically.
not the February or August small turnout. Like, if we want a small turnout, we would have done February or August. But we know April and November are big.
Right.
So we said first things first, we'll try April. And that's just the timeline that played out for us. It wasn't try to find something, hey, let's do it, if nobody shows up, we see the big turnout. That's statistically shown that a school district has a better chance when it's a high turnout. So it's not that we're trying to seek.
Let's do it in fall then, that'd be fine.
And to answer your question earlier, we sent out about 16,000 surveys.
And you only got 3,100 back?
20% replied, sent them in. So they all had a chance to.
I know they did, I'm not sticking up for them if they didn't bring the survey, I did, but 20% of the people, a lot of statistics you have there were 65% were in favor, but 65% of only 20%. It's not like everyone returned it. And there's a lot of people that don't even know about this still. I know you can't.
I can't force that particular
Right,
piece, right?
I get that, but I'm just telling you.
So there's a couple of things that we learned from that survey. One of them was that the bulk of our community prefers to have things in written form.
Okay,
So they prefer to, and not necessarily like the Waukesha Freedom, that's not their place.
sure.
They want a direct mailer from us. So we have three of them up on the table right there that we have sent out. We've sent additional mailers directly to people.
Okay.
Because that was for the individuals in our community who are not parents in the district anymore and they're not employees. So the non-staff, non-parent group, they said when they responded to that survey, that was about 50% of the respondents to that survey, 60% of the respondents, they wanted direct mail, we gave them direct mail. The survey was direct mail from us to them.
Okay.
So everything that we've heard from the community, without a yes or no on this project, has been taken into consideration. Do we do a high school project and a middle school project? The community said no to that. We listened to that. We're coming forward with the middle school piece right now.
Okay.
People asked for print media instead of social media. They don't use Facebook, they don't use Twitter, and they're not looking at our local paper. They want the direct mail. We've given them the direct mail. So from a communication standpoint, we listened to what people asked for. From a building scope standpoint, we took what the majority of the people asked for. And that is what is going to guide our work in this direction. If we weren't listening to the community, right, we would have kept the high school project on there because that would have been a pretty nice project to do. But the community directed our next steps. If we did not listen to the community as far as how do they want the information, the easiest thing for us to do is to put a post on Twitter, a post on Facebook, and send an email. But we're taking that extra step to make sure people have what they need from us, from an academic standpoint, which we've highlighted in our triad, to a specific referendum pamphlet that talks about what this project is. So if there's other ways, if there's other information, if there's anything else we can do to get the message out, we've hosted 3 of these sessions. We reached out to every PTO, service group in the community. We've spoken at the municipalities. They've invited us in. So all of those steps have gone in to try to make sure people are informed. I mean, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You can salt the water, sweeten the oats, salt the oats, sweeten the water, whatever it might be. We're still trying to get that information to people. In this case, is the best that we can do. Sir, you had a question?
I know that the district has a 3-phased program. It was building clear, and originally the second phase of your projects were going to be building the high school. But we got the third phase that you've admitted is coming. And I know that you were, or the community was adamant about putting $22.3 million into the high school after it's already been completed. That's going to be something that's going to be on everybody's minds moving forward. So we're still paying for the referendum going back to 2017. We're still paying for the high school referendum that we paid for in 3 or 4 years, I believe. Now we're going to put another referendum on top of all of that. Also knowing that you've got phase 3 coming. And that phase 3 is going to be at least 22 million. You won't do phase 3. That's going to include the high school project. You wanted to do that now. That will be there, plus whatever else the schools need. So we're going to have another referendum. The one that we're dealing with right now won't expire for 21 years. Unless you can find some way to pay that down quicker.
So if I look at this, the results of this survey that we issued, again, we just talked about listening to the community. The community saying no.
I understand that completely, and that's why you backed it off, and I appreciate that. But that's still going to come. You're saying you will never do that project? You can't tell me.
I'm not saying never, and I'm not going to talk about the next 10, 20 years. I can't predict everything that might come. But right now, I mean, this is not happening right now.
No, it isn't. I understand that.
And as we addressed phase 3, I said if anything happens, there's the question over here. If anything happens at the elementary level, that's if and only if the student enrollment moves at such a level that we have to do something. That's it. There's no conversations going inside the district office about what's next after this, right? Like, our first things first, we want to address this, and we don't have another referendum up our sleeve right after that. I want to put that to rest there. That's not happening.
Okay, so as long as I live in Mukwonago, I'll never see a $22 million referendum for the high school. That's going to address that.
The community is saying no. The community is saying no at this time.
And Mukwonago don't do this. But I also know that there's other school districts that put the same referendum on the ballot every year until they get.
So I would say like this, if we issued a survey and this comes back at 80%, then you'll have a choice, but the community will ultimately say it's not up to me or Dr. Cook. If the community decides, that's where we go.
Yeah.
But it's not to say we're gonna force this. If this number never moves, you'll never see this on a referendum. If this number grew, then you might, but I cannot predict that.
And I don't know if the community actually asked for this, or if the school board started this whole project back in 2017, I believe was the date. Did the school board ask for the conversations with the city and towns about what they want to see in the schools, or did somebody come to the school district and say we need to talk about it?
So the only thing I can let Tom talk about what happened in 2017. Every school district that I've worked in had about a 10-year capital plan that addressed what facilities needed to be done, that looked at what future enrollment was projected to be. And so you do two things with that. The first thing you do is come up with a list that Tom showed that talked about the potential work here at Parkview. The second thing is where are we at as far as our spaces go? So do we then need to go and have a referendum, for instance, to address a cafeteria at a school? Is that pushing the limits? Do we have to have a referendum to discuss a performing arts center? Do we have to have a referendum to discuss a field house? Or do we have to have a referendum that discusses the whole school? But every system that I've worked in has had a 10-year capital plan. Specific to 2017, we let you carry on with that.
I mean, when in 2017, if we go back to the timeline here, we knew this building, given that, okay, we addressed the middle school, now we have this aging Parkview Middle School. Should we do anything? Should we just let it ride? You know, there comes a point where, you know, I have a 2009 car, and I just put $3,500 into it. My wife yelled at me. She said, why do you keep sticking money into that car? Just go get a new one. And she kind of made sense. Don't tell her I said that, though, okay? She made sense. And then kind of in the building sense, it's the same way. Do we just keep sticking money into this, knowing at some point replacement will come? So when is the time right? Now, in terms of, can you ask your question? I want to make sure I answer it. What was the question? Did the
school board started the project on Parkview.
Yes, I mean, the 9 elected school board members, that was a conversation that the school board asked for. When the school board asks for information, it's my job and Dr. Cook's job as the superintendent business manager to give answers. You have questions, we give answers. And then they decide to dictate which direction to go, and that's what they're elected to do. Did I answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
In the back there.
So you have, and Kirk, you can probably address this better. Legislature right now, is there a construction manager pick between Colin and Schmidt, or is that still up for?
Yes.
proposal?
Kirk, do you want to
Yes,
answer?
I can share that, Press, yep. So, C.G. Schmidt and J.B. Collin were two firms that we have worked with. We went through an RFP process to select the construction manager if this project goes forward, right? So in that competitive process, there was 3 firms that responded to that RFP, and all that was hiring was the firm to manage this project. The one question in fees was to manage this first part of the planning phase. If this goes forward, what's the fee that we were able to compare against others to manage the actual construction? So that's the process that we use. Then when the project gets designed, J.P. Cullen was selected for the construction management portion. They're responsible to bid it out to the carpenters, the drywallers, the demo guys, and those bids come to us then, and we pay what those bids are, plus their fee that we already went through the RFP process for.
So right now in the legislature, they're talking about doing away with construction management for schools. And if that happens, then it goes to an open bid for all general contractors. So is that are you grandfathered?
Well, I don't think they're going to pass that before we get to this project here. So,
Well,
and that's a.
legislature right now. I know
That's
agency
it.
is against it, a couple other trade organizations are against it, but, you know,
that wouldn't affect us on this project here with where we're at. That is a piece that we are, with where we're at, it wouldn't affect us. I don't know if Sean, if you have any more comment on that. Sean is from J.P. Cullen, from the construction management firm. If you have any more comment on that?
No, I don't. It's, legislation's in there. There's Dewey Strobel, he introduces that legislation a lot. So it is proposed. It passing is a completely different story. And what it gets down to, there's neighboring states that have a similar procurement process. But ultimately, it's still, you're going out, you're bidding, you're getting multiple numbers on the package and it comes back.
All the trade back.
Yep.
Which you are allowed to bid as well.
Yep.
The other question I have is, I've seen other school districts years ago where they've done it from up to six to 8, and 2 years later they close the school. They close an elementary school. What is the likelihood of one of these elementary schools being closed in 3 to 5 years when all of a sudden the need is not there? I know Mukwonago is still growing as well as the other communities around here, but is that in your capital plan? What happens if we have to close a school?
Sure. So as we take a look at enrollment trends right now, our capacity, so when we take a look at every single classroom available, the number of students we can get into those classrooms, we are nearing capacity. We are close to capacity at all of our elementary schools, okay? Unless something dramatic happens that causes enrollment to drop off a cliff there, I don't see that scenario happening. Now, with 6th grade moving out and 4K coming in, those spaces will still be used, but we're not close enough where we have a concern about an elementary school outright closing. And especially when you look at our 90 square miles of geography that we cover, Big Bend Elementary, I guess I'd say it like this: families like having a local neighborhood school. People in Big Bend don't want to travel to Clarendon to use that. And same thing with Prairie View. And when you look at our 90 square miles, we cover it evenly with the elementary schools that we have. And closing an elementary school, I don't know that's going to serve our communities, our neighborhoods, and it's not something that's on our radar at this time as a concern. It's not a concern right now.
Okay. Last question. I'm concerned about 2-3 years from now, with all the expansion and whatnot, all of a sudden we're going to see an operating referendum being asked. I know you have a balanced budget right now, but what is the surplus, and is that something that we should be considering when we vote for this referendum? Is after this one, we're going to be asked for an operating referendum to fund the schools?
Excellent.
Fund salaries or whatever else.
Sure. Excellent question. I don't want to speak for the school board because they're the 9 members that will ultimately make that say. But based on how my 8.5 years of living here and working here, and communities similar to the same values that we have here in Mukwonago, I think our community, generally speaking, or a community like ours, can support a referendum when there's a building that goes to show for it. Right, a capital referendum that's going to build something that's yours to have, to own, an asset of the community. When you ask an operating referendum, you say, hey, can we have more money just to keep doing what we're doing? That's where I think that's much tougher to sell, and I'm not sure, I can't speak for the whole community, but I know that's tougher to sell. So you have to really proceed with caution in those areas. And we're building our budget currently now as we have in the past, where we are not spending every single last dollar to the point where if something happens, we say, hey, community, we need more money. I think one task that I am understanding from my boss is keep us out of the area of having to ask for an operating referendum, or in an area where we're saying, hey, we need a roof repair, but we can't afford it. We are doing everything we can to avoid those things. I think that would be a really tough sell. Could it happen? Sure. I can't say no to that. Do I anticipate that? I do not. I don't.
I just wanted to remind everybody, with the high school, we did have a $7 million operating referendum that was passed as well. So we're going to more than double the middle school, and we're not going to ask for any money. to continue to operate that one?
No.
Okay. I just wonder why the difference between the high school and middle school. We did pass a $7 million referendum there for the operating budget.
So that's an additional $350,000 a year for 20 years to pay for the additional square footage that was associated with that. We're not asking for that in this referendum. We'll pay those bills in the new building when they come for energy costs. Yes, sir?
What's with the 4K? What's bringing that in?
Isn't that called daycare?
Actually, let's dispel that right now if we could. We are being assessed academically much harder than we have ever been. And so what used to be kindergarten, my kindergarten experience, where we were coming in learning numbers, learning letters, learning the colors, that is no longer the case even at 4-year-old kindergarten. The state assessment system for schools is such that you must be reading at the 3rd grade level, which is why we're proud of that proficiency level that we have. But that is not daycare, not by a long shot. And what we observe in the schools, time and time again, is when a child goes through our 4-year-old kindergarten program, their school readiness in kindergarten is so much more than what a child who has not gone through a 4K experience has been. That the work that the kindergarten teacher is doing right now to level that is substantial. And what we find is the kids who go through the 4K programs, and this is not just the Mukwonago schools, this is any school that I've ever been associated with, are that much further ahead academically. Those students are performing basic math, they learn number sense, they learn how to read, they're entering into the realm of phonics. 4K is hugely important. It is hugely important across all school districts, and that's why all school districts have added it. Does it help families out? Absolutely. It absolutely provides a benefit to families. I would never deny that. It does free parents up to go back to work earlier if they've been home. It does reduce child costs. But that does not at all equate to the academics benefit that the children are receiving. There is no fee. It is reimbursed at the state level at 60% per student. So for every one student that we get at the state, we have what, $10,000, $11,000 in revenue that we get? For a 4K student, it is 60% of that.
So the taxpayers are paying for the daycare for these
It's not daycare. I'm going to stop that conversation right now. It is absolutely not daycare. If you were to come into a 4K classroom, if you were to look at the data from 4-year-olds in schools to 5-year-olds, it is not that. And when you look at how we are being evaluated as schools, when kids have to take a forward exam starting in 3rd grade, when they take early literacy assessments, which our state representatives, and we are proud of, but our state representatives look at, it is absolutely not a daycare setting. It is not 100% play. It is sound academics in early learning that is play-based. It is not, absolutely not daycare. Yes, sir.
So at this point, it's not state mandated?
It is not state mandated. There's no compulsory attendance. But I believe there's only about a dozen school districts, maybe 2 dozen in the state, that don't offer it. So it is fully vested. Many school districts, not most, are going to full day 4K, where the children are there for the full day. Many school districts still have half-day 4K programs, AM, PM designs. Most school districts are hosting their own 4K right now in neighborhood schools for 2 reasons. 1, convenience for families, but 2, consistency. As Tom had mentioned earlier in the presentation, we started with 6 community partners. We now have 3 community partners. And that hasn't been because we've pulled teaching back or we've pulled those locations back. That's because those community partners were not staying in business and not staying as a location. And we've had to pull those back into our school district. Further, some of our community partners have asked us to hire and select a teacher. When the prior model was, it was their teacher, their location. They've asked us in order to maintain those seats, which are needed by our families, for us then to cover the teacher. So 4K 20 years ago, yes, it was what it was. But we were not being assessed the same way academically, and the demands on the school were not what they were now. And that is true across every school district. It's been part of every 4-year-old kindergarten discussion. I've been in front of communities that have made similar comments. 4K is not daycare, it is an academic program. And if anybody wants to come in and sit through what our 4K teachers are doing, the invitation is there. We'll work with our principals and you can come in and take a seat and watch what goes on in a 4K classroom.
Talking about the 4K, I have family in Iowa that have kids going to, actually it's called 3K, and they're learning to write their numbers, their letters, doing everything.
Yep. Yeah, so there are some states that
It
fund.
isn't just daycare.
Right, there are some states that are funding 3-year-old programs. Wisconsin does not fund a 3-year-old program. There are private schools that are offering down to 2-year-old programs, birth to 2-year-old programs in the private locations. And we can get into why that is. I mean, there's probably a million reasons. But I do know that the 4K experience is an academic experience, and the students that go through a 4K experience are substantially further ahead by the time they hit that 3rd grade test, which is why you see the numbers and the results that we get. Those numbers, that 65.4%, that highest score in Waukesha County, that is not by accident. We're not doing a comparison against a Milwaukee public school in that number. Our comparison is Pewaukee, Muskego, Elmbrook, Kettle Moraine, school districts of similar demographic, similar family involvement, and we have the highest score there. And that is by design, that is not by accident.
Was that, what were those test results 5 years ago?
The 3rd grade reading score 5 years ago, I don't have the exact number, but we laid. And if you look at the school report card, in not in the referendum triad, but in the one that talks about how we are doing, if you were to go back and look at our comparisons on our school report card across all of our schools, with the building that we're in right now, and looking back at Luke, the work that Luke and his staff have done, Parkview Middle School was the school in Mukwonago that was our lowest performing school. I believe it's been in the last 4 years, we've increased by nearly 12 points on that school report card in both the area of math and literacy. So the academic work that is happening, there's a benefit to that. 4-year-old kindergarten through 6th grade, and then when they make the transition into the middle school. We're seeing that across our elementary and middle levels. Sorry.
If this gets voted down in April, when's it going to be back on the ballot?
We're going to survey the community after that, and take a look at the work that we did and see what the results are. And
What if
then
it's like, what if it's 75 to 25 no? Would it be put back on in November?
it could be. It could be. That would be a decision for the school board. Sorry, right there.
Funding, you, $10,000, $17 per student, is that the shared revenue from the state? What do you get from the taxpayers in the area? Our tax funds, don't they go into?
Yeah, no, the per student amount that we get, is about a 50-50 split between state sourced and local property taxes.
Okay, that's.
Not every school, that goes through something called an equalized formula, and I won't go into all that. We have certain school board meetings, and some of our school board members here can tell you how I go through the economics of that. But property-rich school districts get light state funding, because they have the property wealth to pay their own share, and property-poor districts will get more state funding. So the amount of money we get per student, we're about average in the state, so we get about 50% of that from the state, 50% of that from our taxpayers.
The 5 elementary schools, I mean, we got $5 million that we are proposing to help transition from 5th to K4. Is it $1 million a school? Did we do estimates on what it's going to cost to do those schools, or did we just kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat?
Nope, we did estimates on that with JP Collin, with others.
And they're all pretty equal at $1 million? Or is that the way it's being broke down?
No, some schools have more space, more square footage that's being touched than others. Some are not getting as much work done. So, Clint, did you want to add something onto that?
And the Big Bend site's also included in that as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, like Big Bend, I think if you saw, had very little, so the renovation amount within that's probably I would say almost the least of all of them. Some of the others where we're touching the locker rooms in addition to the classrooms, a little bit more work is in each. So it wasn't, yeah, it's $1 million a school. There was budgets behind this that were developed.
Yeah. These numbers have, the math is behind them. It's not just, hey, we think this. There's estimates that go into all the square footage in each building. So as you see, Big Bend has just this area here, whereas we have some other spaces here. Clarendon has some storage space that's not really being used academically as good as it should be. So there's a little bit more investment here than there is here. It's not just $1 million a school.
Yeah, it's hard to look at that little bit of blue on top of that large gray and say that's $1 million renovation. Is all I can say.
And in this case, I would say it's not, so.
Well, I mean, when the plumbing comes through for the toilets to come in and the space, the walls get knocked down, I wish it didn't cost that much either, but I don't get to decide how much it costs, right?
No, I get it. Speaking of cost, I also noticed in the referendum that we are going to get, if it passes, Parkview will get brand new furniture and brand new fixtures as well. What happens with all the stuff that we get right now?
No, so I guess that when you look at the referendum question, it mentions furnitures and fixtures. It's not to say it would be all new. We would make use of as much that we possibly could here. So when you look through that, we can only use the money the referendum provides for on things that are in the question. We couldn't say, oh, we're going to you don't see Eagleville Elementary embedded in this. Eagleville is one of our 6 elementary schools. We could not take any of this money and go to Eagleville and do a project because the taxpayers and the voters didn't allow for that. So we can only do the things that are spelled out in the work. Some of the money would be used for furniture and fixtures, but we would still use it if these cafeteria tables work and meet our needs, we're moving them over, we're keeping them. We would never be so foolish as just throw these chairs away and say, oh, we're getting new ones. We don't work like that. We're not going to go that route.
And we do know that there are some questions or comments floating around that we're going to do this referendum and then go somewhere else with it. That is illegal. We are not able to take this money and do anything outside of the scope of what you see on that ballot. So there have been some questions here tonight around like they're going to take money and they're going to use it at the high school for an athletic facility. It's not, it cannot happen. That is forbidden by law. This question was drafted by bond counsel. There are laws that say if you ask for the money and the community says you're going to be able to use it, it is addressed here. This is the scope of the project. This is the only thing we can touch with it.
I have been asked to ask this question, not my question, but a community member contacted me and asked if possibly somebody here could tell what a 3-story building would be like on the property. They were at the high school this week, and they were looking at the high ceilings and the new gyms and the auditorium, and they were asking how much higher in the sky it would look like on the property. So I don't know if anybody here can answer.
I would say you could equate it to the hospital in town, because that is a 3-story building as well.
And that again would be the academic wing of the building.
Yes.
There would be a gymnasium cafeteria side of that, which would be similar in height to what we have at NHS.
And just to further touch on that, again, the idea for this 3-story was recognizing, again, we have a great site. This is a nice sized site, but obviously they only make so much land. And so the idea to go 3 stories was just to try to make sure we had ample green space and stuff. As we go through, there's nothing in this question, I guess, in terms of the question. If we go through the design or the process of the design and the staff we're working with says, you know, academically it would be better if it was something else, we'll consider that. And again, it was just the idea for the footprint to make sure it could fit and work on that site. And again, using actually a couple different schools that we've done where that 3-story worked really well to segregate each of the class levels into different areas.
Maxwell Street days and other things that we want to do park to the community. So if parking lots really needed here, we would like.
It's not resolute that it will be 3 stories either, I would say.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, wait.
So now we have a 3-story building, we got fire trucks that reach 3 stories, and you guys pay for
So I use the example of the hospital, that is a 3-story building now.
Put 1,200 just increase in that area. I'm assuming you're following this up, but when you just said 3
So
stories.
like the new building would be sprinklered because it would have to come up code in that capacity. We do have a ladder truck in this community that would be able to service the building for that height as well as reach. And this community relies on mutual aid, so there's also other fire equipment coming from other communities. Yep, we're good.
Listen, we appreciate everything you guys are doing, and everybody that I've talked to about this, our taxes are relatively cheap here, we get that, it's a great place to live, but everybody that I've talked to, from man to man to every person I've talked to are worried that this place is gonna turn into another Greenfield or Oak Creek where decent city, but you can't afford to live there anymore, because I have a friend who lives there in a decent sized house, $10,000 in taxes. I get it, we're not paying that here, and the taxes are relatively low, but it just seems like then after this, that's gonna be something else and something else. That's what the people that I talk to are worried about.
If I get the assessors coming around.
Yeah, we gotta reassess them.
Everybody's getting reassessed, that's not gonna go down, that's gonna
No,
go
it
up.
is
So
not.
I guess if I'd like to address
Sure.
the reassessment. So our school district had a $32 million tax levy this past year. And when we had that $32 million, we parsed that out 11 different ways. It goes to the Village of Big Bend, Village of North Prairie, Town of Mukwonago, all the municipalities. I send it to the clerk. And the amount that they're responsible for is a proportional rate. So if the Village of Big Bend represents 10% of the whole district's property wealth, they get 10% of that $32 million. Within Big Bend, if they reassess there, it's really to make sure that if everybody goes up 5%, the same amount of tax is still going to Big Bend. It's just there's one house next door to another that just renovated and expanded and built a new detached garage. If you add substantial value and the reassessment captures that, then you're just ultimately paying your fair share. But really, your house has to improve a lot more relative to all the others in your neighborhood in order for your bill to move. It's a way just to make sure that you are ultimately paying a fair share for your taxes. If all of Big Bend goes up 10%, relatively speaking, and Town of Mukwonago is getting assessed, it's not going to shift it tremendously.
Well, that's what everybody says.
I know what they say.
Because they say they're going to base it off of real estate. The real estate market went insane for a couple of years. But that's not reality. In another year or two, that's going to come down.
Tom, what happens to our levy and our mill rate if reassessment happens and values of homes go up?
Say that again?
Then the mill
Hold on.
rate stop.
The mill rate goes down.
So if there's a reassessment and property values go up, does our portion go up commensurate with, our 32 million is 32 million?
Our 32 million is just where does that get spread? If your house rises faster than everyone else, then your bill's going to go up because your house is worth more. But if everybody's going up 10% together, your house isn't becoming more relative to the others. Everyone's like a rising tide raises all ships, I think. Our district, within this year, the year prior, went up 14% collectively, and then 10% this year. But that doesn't mean your tax bill is going up 14% or 10%. It just means here's how much your house is worth. Everybody's coming with you. And as the tax bill is spread out evenly, unless your house goes up more than everybody else's, you're still getting this, the same proportionate share.
Right, but it's still going up.
It still goes.
Now, look at the bottom line, my house went up $450 just for the high school renovation, and this is gonna be almost, half again that much. I'm looking at another $1,000 on my tax bill every year.
Yeah.
So the increase is going to be $69 for $100,000 of your house's fair market value. So if your house is worth $500,000, that'd be $350 increase, not $1,000.
Well, I multiplied the 69 cents per thousand for what my house is worth, and it came out to almost $500.
For the year?
Based on what your house is worth, and that could be your math. That could be your math based on your house value.
Well, it's another $1,000 I'm laying out every year, that's my bottom line. My wages didn't go up that same percentage.
Wages aren't up, gas is up, food is up, everybody's getting screwed.
We're living in a Biden economy here, which is 17% inflation.
It's kind of a bad time to be asking for more money.
Amen.
It's just, any thought to parking this for a year or two? Maybe until the high school
It's
jumps
the,
off.
it's the choice of the community to say no. I mean, I can't speak for the whole community,
Honestly, I
but
hate saying no to the schools. We need them. But
I guess the cost of doing nothing is that if we do this in the future, it's gonna grow. The cost will grow. I can't ignore that fact, right? Inflation is not gonna go away.
could come down. Interest rates could drop.
I hope so.
They should.
They should.
Depending on what happens here at the end of the year. But, you know, it's.
I don't know that there's ever an awesome time to ask this, right? I was real with it, right? I get that. But if the community ultimately votes, you know, at the ballot box, and we'll take those orders and we'll march with them, right? We'll listen.
I know I asked you earlier, you said if it goes through, we're looking at the end of 27 being done, or?
This would open in the fall of 2027. The new middle school would open then at that time. Yep.
Okay.
So at which point would our taxes actually start to see this increase,
If it passes this April, your next tax bill.
the next one?
Yes, sir?
So the 69 cents that you're talking about,
Yep.
that's in addition to phase one, what we're paying now?
Yep.
For years 1 through 3, and then it drops down to 69 cents?
So that the way that the debt is structured is that we would continue to pay off what the work was at the high school, and then when that drops off, we would take that drop to, again, keep paying off the middle school. So basically, I'm gonna go back to this slide here that talks about, that's one of the last ones, bear with me just a second here. The mill rates would go to $1.90, so ultimately, here we go. All right. So at this level here, we're taxing about $6 million to pay for our long-term debt. We would go to $9 million in our long-term debt and stay at $9 million every year. So the assumption that we have here is property values will increase by about 2% per year. And that's just conservative. We're not going to guess, hey, it's going to keep growing 10% each and every year. But we would take one lift to $9 million and keep it at $9 million each and every year until it's all paid off. So it's basically, we're just trying to boil it down to the least common denominator and say it's one lift, some debt expires, but then we use that room to keep paying off the debt as best we can so we can settle the debts as quickly as we can.
And that's as long as we don't have another referendum to worry about.
That is correct. I don't know why you keep thinking we have another one up our sleeve. One referendum's a lot of work. I'll be the first one to say it's a lot of added work that it isn't always fun. I'm not trying to bring 2 or 3 more of these onto my plate, so I just want to put that to rest
We
there.
live close to the metro area. We see all the referendums around the board.
We live in Mukwonago.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The 102 million, and you're talking about the school opening in 27. So inflation and all that, I mean, you're not gonna get a lot of contractors that are gonna say, hey, I'm gonna bid this and this price is gonna hold over the next 2 years. I mean, what we saw what's happened in the last couple of years, prices went nuts. Contractors are, you know, couldn't get materials gotten way better, but prices, you don't know that, you know, you're paying, $50 a square foot for something right now, and these prices 2 years from now, it's 75.
I want to let Kurt here answer that one for us.
Yes, so that process, if we pass in April, design happens from April to December. That December then, bids will go out, right? So bid documents, the bids will go out and have a schedule attached, and we are expecting at that point that contractors at the time they're bidding in December, through that 18 months or so schedule, it's not all defined, but that schedule that is in the bid documents, they will commit to this is the price that they're going to charge for the work, and that's how we evaluate the bid. So come December, when it's all designed, send out the bid, they'll give us their sum, and then we make a decision on who we're selecting come December of this next, December, January next year.
Contractors' backlogs are starting to shrink now too, so pricing will improve rather than continue to go up. You probably kind of conservative, I think.
I agree with what you're saying.
And that is our hope, we hit that sweet spot, right? And if we hit that sweet spot of contract, And historically, we were talking about the timing of this, historically, January is a great time to be bidding. When you talk, so if we didn't have this in April, if we had a November referendum, that's not as good of time to be bidding with how it stacks up. So there's a lot of variables that go into it, but historically, January bid time is the time of the year as contractors are trying to fill their schedule up for the summer and then some. So with luck, the numbers come in better. And if it does, the dollars don't get spent then, right? All the dollars don't get spent. Or some of those other priorities that we weren't able to capture in here could be done.
And if it doesn't come in at that level, then what happens? Let's say the bids are a lot higher than what we're allotting here.
We can't expand over that. We can't go over.
Right, but I'm asking what happens then. I mean, you build less of a building?
We pull back on scope if necessary, or if there's operational dollars that are available, that's an option as well. But we can't go back out and ask that question at that point in time.
Yeah,
so
I'm just
along the way, and to give you a little more on the process itself, one of the reasons we have that construction manager on board during the design process, so JP Cullen, as part of that design process, as the design is happening, they put their expertise and budgeting behind that. So that 8 to 12 months of design, Bray Architects will put a concept out there at design development level. The construction manager will then price that, and they'll say, you're about 10% over, you gotta pull back in different areas, right? And then they'll do it again at the 50% drawing level. And so that process, if done right, when bid day comes, we won't be over, because it's a lot easier to make those adjustments when we're designing versus after the project goes out to bid. So that's one of the values of having the construction manager on board, so they can inform design and make sure we're on budget when we go out to bid.
Just one more question. Who makes a decision on the final design? Like, they draw it up, the architects draw it up, and then who decides, oh, this is good, this is not good, or
I want it to be me.
Usually those final designs are for the school board, correct?
Yeah,
I know you can't ask everybody, I understand that.
It's a good question, right? There's a number of different stakeholders that get involved. So Bray, the architect, will do the design, and then as part of the process, the reason it takes 9 to 12 months of the process is during that time, we'll be talking to staff, principal, different stakeholders that are going to be using the building. What do you want, right? Well, just because a teacher says that's what they want doesn't mean what they get, but we look for what's best practices from what Bray's expertise is and from what instructional is, and then we have that check, right? To your point of the budget side, then we have that check because you start putting all the wants on paper, then we have JP Cullen do the budget check. Wait, that's expanding more than what we can afford, so we pull back. So it's a process that we're getting the different input, checking with the dollars, refining the plan, and then continuing through there. So it's a collective input. Along the way, we are presenting to the board of here's what it looks like, here's the, and so they get input on it as well. But it's multiple stakeholders involved.
Okay. I want the room to know I really appreciate your questions, though. I mean, these have been very good, and I do appreciate them. Yes, sir.
My other question is, the information on the tax roll does not update when you pay off sooner. So currently it says 2034, 2036. Is there a reason why that doesn't get updated?
On your individual income tax, or your property tax bill? So that, as we have the opportunity to pay off more debt now, I mean, in theory, we have the ability to pay off 5 or 6 years worth of debt right now, okay? Now, whether we do that or not, it's a school board decision. We're just holding course right now to let this process play out. And if it doesn't work, then we'll be evaluating as to where do we want to move forward. But we currently have the opportunity, if we were to pause this, to pay this all off by the 26-27 school year. So we could pay off 3 to 4 years right now. And then as we move forward to this fall, we pay off 2024 and 2029. And then next year, we pay off 2025 and 2028. And then the following year, we hit up those last 2 years.
How much do you have in reserve?
Right now, we have debt, amount for debt, $9 million to pay for debt. So we could pay for debt right now. We have, our debt at Mukwonago High School is 2% debt. The debt that we would have here would be 5% debt. It's not the most preferred thing to pay off your low interest rate, you pay off your high interest rate. So we're just gonna hold for a couple months, or not even, a couple weeks yet to see where this goes. We may be paying off old debt, we'll have to plan and adapt as the community votes.
But your tax bill will say what was the end of the projected, from the first borrow, it'll be the 20 years after that first borrow. Because if we got into a situation as a school district where we didn't stay on this debt repayment and we were to restructure that debt, we would have until 2036,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
To pay that off. So that's the end of our loan that we took. But the way the board and Tom have set up our repayment plan, we're shaving years off of that. And then when the debt was settled, that's when your bill would reflect that the debt was settled.
Was it some of this done with COVID money, or was it just district money?
District money.
District money.
We use one-time money for one-time bills. We spent all that money, by and large, on helping kids recover in the classroom, and that's it. That's what those dollars were intended for, and we didn't do anything outside of that. We met with the community and talked about what he wants to do, and similar to this here, listening to the community is important, we don't take that lightly. Now, not everybody comes to those meetings. Thank you for coming, we appreciate it. Not everyone comes to these meetings, though, but we do listen when we get feedback, so.
So we're just gonna take 1 second here. We have Luke and Lee in the back there. They're willing to offer tours right now, walk around some of the spaces that we talked about. So if anybody's interested in going to the tour, doesn't have any more questions for us, feel free to break away and go with them. If there are other questions, Tom and I are available certainly to answer them for the rest of the evening. So thank you all at this time. But if you have questions, please stick around and ask them.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.